that night? That question cannot be answered just yet.
Agencies for justice sake, though displeased by the opposition using the businessman's death.
In the heart of Kenya, one man dared to speak the truth, exposing the corrupt webs that held the country in their grip. Jacob Juma, a businessman, activist, and fearless whistleblower, uncovered secrets too dangerous for some to bear. But with power, money, and influence in the line, his voice was silenced. Assassinated on the streets of Nairobi, his murder remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of the cost of truth in a country built on secrets. Who killed Jacob Juma and why? This is the story of a man who spoke out and paid with his life. This is Dark Echoes, where we tell the stories that history tried to bury. Jacob Juma's story begins in a quiet rural village of Mungore in Bungoma County. Born in 1971, he was raised in a modest household in Western Kenya, surrounded by the daily challenges that shaped many children growing up in rural areas. From a young age, Jacob stood out for his sharp mind, bold personality, and a relentless drive to rise above circumstances. Those who knew him in childhood describe him as intelligent, outspoken boy who never backed down from a challenge and often questioned authority, a trait that will define much of his adult life. His parents emphasized the value of education, discipline, and self-reliance, values that became core to his identity as he matured. Juma's primary education was at a local public school in Bungoma, where he consistently performed above average. He wasn't just academically gifted, he also had a sharp tongue and a quick wit. His confidence set him apart, and teachers often remembered him for his outspoken nature even at a young age. His academic performance earned him a place at a reputable secondary school, where he further refined his intellectual abilities. It was during this phase of his life that Jacob Juma's leadership skills began to shine. He often took part in school debates and discussions, engaging deeply in matters of politics, economics, and governance. Peers describe him as someone who was never shy to challenge ideas, even if it meant going against popular opinion. Driven by a clear sense of purpose, Juma proceeds into the University of Nairobi, one of Kenya's most prestigious institutions. There, he pursued studies in business or related fields, aligning with his long-term business of entering the entrepreneurial space. University's life exposed him to broader political discourse and gave him a clearer view of how economic power and political influence often intersected in Kenya's society. These insights will later influence both his business choice and his outspoken activism. Upon graduation, Juma wasted no time stepping into the business world. His first ventures were in construction and mining sectors, industry that, while lucrative, demanded sharp strategy and the ability to navigate complex networks. He soon established himself as a bold and ambitious entrepreneur. One of his earliest and most well-known companies was Erad Supplies and General Constructors, which later gained national attention through a controversial legal dispute involving a Kenyan government and a failed maize supply contract. In his early years as a businessman, Jacob Juma earned a reputation for being fiercely independent, unafraid of power structures, and confident in pursuing large-scale deals that many of his peers would shy away from. He was known for walking into high-level offices and boardrooms with little hesitation, often negotiating deals with major government institutions. His wealth began to grow quickly, and so did his name, especially within the elite circle. Despite his rising profile, Juma was also a family man. He married and had children, although he deliberately kept his personal life private. While his voice was loud and combative in the public space, especially on political matters, he kept his wife and children away from the spotlight. Friends and associates noted that he valued his family's safety and preferred to keep them out of the controversies that began to follow him as his public presence grew. In private, he was described as loyal, generous, and protective. Though his personality was intense and sometimes confrontational, those close to him spoke of a man who deeply cared about his roots, community, and family legacy. He was known to give back quietly to local schools, support youth in his home region, and sponsor education for several needy students, though he rarely advertised these acts. By the time Jacob Juma entered his mid-30s, he was no longer just a businessman. His early experiences, both academic and personal, had molded him into someone deeply aware of the country's inequalities and systematic corruption. These early stages of his life laid the foundation for the bold, controversial, and fearless figure that Kenya would later come to know, not just as a businessman, but as a defiant political activist who refused to stay silent. Jacob Juma was not a typical businessman. In the Kenyan political and economic scene, he carved out a unique position for himself, a wealthy entrepreneur who turned into a relentless government critic. What set him apart wasn't just his boldness, it was the way he exposed and attacked corruption at the highest levels of power, naming names and daring consequences. His activism, mostly conducted via social media and courtrooms, positioned him as both a threat to the political elite and a champion to frustrated citizens. Juma's most intense and consistent activism focused on the Eurobond scandal. In 2014, the Kenyan government raised over 250 billion Kenyan shillings, roughly $2.7 billion through a sovereign bond. But as months passed, questions arose about where the funds had gone. Juma jumped into the debates, tweeting detailed threads that accused top government officials, especially in the National Treasury, of stealing large portions of the money. He described the bond as the biggest theft in Kenya's history and called out the Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich and others for orchestrating a cover-up. This made him an enemy to many in government circles, but a hero to Kenyans desperate for accountability. He did not stop at Eurobond. Juma also raised hell over corruption in the Ministry of Transport, especially regarding major infrastructure contracts. He alleged that tenders were rigged and inflated to benefit political connected firms. He frequently accused cabinet secretary and senior technocrats of pocketing billions in kickbacks. What made his activism powerful was the detail. He didn't just rant. He posted documents, named bank accounts, and listed foreign trips tied to shady dealings. To many, it felt like Juma knew too much. His Twitter account became his battleground. There, he functioned like an investigative journalist, political commentator, and a whistleblower rolled into one. Juma used the platform to make explosive claims about government corruption, intelligence agency abuse, election rigging, and even bribery in the judiciary. He had no filter. He accused the Kenyan Revenue Authority of harassment, criticized the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission for being toothless, and blasted media houses for playing safe. In one post, he mocked Kenya's anti-corruption war as a dance in a circle led by the same people looting the country. Another major controversy centered around his company, Erad Supplies and General Constructors, and its legal battle with the National Cereals and Produce Board. In 2004, Erad was contracted to import maize, but the deal fell apart. Juma sued and won a 1.4 billion Kenyan shillings award for breach of contracts. The government resisted paying, accusing him of inflating costs and using court influence. He in turn accused politicians and judges of conspiring against him. The case became a long-drawn saga that exposed just how entangled business, law, and politics had become in Kenya. For Juma, it was more than a business dispute. It was evidence of systematic sabotage against independent businessmen who aligned with power. Juma also stirred controversy by accusing high-ranking politicians, especially those aligned with the ruling Jubilee government, of using state institutions to punish dissenters. He frequently referred to Kenya as a mafia-run state, arguing that true reform was impossible under the existing political order. He mocked government promises, dismissed anti-corruption task forces, and went as far as questioning the credibility of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission (IEBC) long before elections were even on the horizon. His critics called him erratic, egotistical, and self-serving. Some believed his activism was less about public interest and more about fighting personal battles, especially when he was facing legal or financial pressure. But Juma didn't care. He doubled down. He claimed he was being targeted for exposing the truth. He frequently stated that no one had the guts to say what he was saying. Despite the backlash, Jacob Juma activism left a mark. He changed how people viewed political accountability in the digital age. In a country where activism were often confined to press conferences or civil society forums, Juma proved that a single, relentless voice armed with data, receipts, and internet connection could shake the system. He didn't form a political party. He didn't lead street protests, but he made powerful people sweat. And that was revolutionary in its own way. Jacob Juma was no stranger to controversy. Before he became widely known as a fierce government critic and political activist, he was already deeply entangled in high-stakes business deals and court cases that put him in a collision course with Kenya's powerful elites. While his supporters saw him as a whistleblower exposing deep corruptions, critics viewed him as a cunning businessman who used political noise to shield his own interest. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. One of the most notable legal battles that defined Jacob Juma's rise to national attention was his long-running dispute with the Kenyan government through the National Cereal and Produce Board. At the center of this storm was his company, Erad Supplies and General Constructors. In the early 2000s, Juma Farm was awarded a contract by National Cereals and Produce Board to supply 40,000 metric tons of maize during a food crisis. However, the deal quickly soured. Juma claimed that despite signing the contract, National Cereals Produce Board failed to issue a letter of credit, essentially a guarantee of payment, forcing him to halt any further actions. According to him, this breach led to serious financial losses, including storage fees and demurrage charges from suppliers abroad. When the deal collapsed, Erad sued the government for breach of contract and was awarded over 500 million in arbitration, but this payout became the center of fierce public debates. The government fought back, arguing that Juma never actually delivered the maize and should not be compensated for service not rendered. The case went through Kenya's courts, the Court of Appeal, and even drew attention from Parliament, sparking heated discussions about the integrity of government tenders, shady procurement processes, and legal loopholes. The backlash didn't faze him. Juma, instead, it seemed to energize him. He took to social media, particularly Twitter, to air his grievances not just about the maize case, but about the alleged corruption in government. His tweets were blunt, unfiltered, and unapologetically aggressive, accusing top government officials of corruption, theft, and criminal activities. He openly called out individuals in the executive, judiciary, and legislature, naming names and claiming he had documents to prove everything he said. But Juma wasn't just fighting the state. He also had tense run-ins with other private business entities. At one point, he was locked in a dispute with Ministry of Mining, which revoked one of his mining licenses under controversial circumstances. Juma accused officials of sabotaging his work, even alleging bribery and abuse of power. He went public with documents, emails, and letters that he claimed showed how his gold and copper mining ventures were being deliberately stalled by corrupt officials who wanted kickbacks. This pattern repeated itself in several instances. A business deal falls through or faces government resistance. Juma responds by unleashing a storm on Twitter or taking legal actions, and then doubles down by threatening to release explosive evidence. Whether or not all his claims were provable, they made headlines, dominated public discourse, and made him a household name. However, this high-voltage approach also earned him powerful enemies. Critics accused him of blackmail style activism, using his social media presence to pressure officials, shield himself from scrutiny, or influence court proceedings. Some accused him of being a tenderpreneur, a political connected businessman who survives on government deals and then cries foul when deals go bad. Regardless of perspective, what cannot be denied is that Jacob Juma knew how to command attention. He combined legal acumen, media savvy, and political boldness to stay relevant and visible, often portraying himself as a victim of state-sponsored sabotage and corporate greed. His habit of posting documents, screenshots, and letters, sometimes official, other times dubious, created a digital archive of allegations that remain online to this day. What made his controversies even more complex was the timing and targets. Many of the public accusations coincided with election seasons, government scandals, or sensitive policy debates. His name came up frequently in media discussions, not just for the Mays case or his mining troubles, but for his rumored connections with opposition leaders, his public feuds with politicians, and his constant claims that his life was in danger. In fact, in the months leading up to his death, Juma repeatedly warned that "they want to kill me," a statement many believe was tied not just to his political tweets, but to the very business cases and courtroom battles that had dragged powerful figures into the spotlight. Ultimately, Jacob Juma's controversies revealed the fragile line between business, politics, and justice in Kenya. Whether seen as a crusader or a cunning operator, he brought the light to the deep entanglements that define the country's elite circles, where deals are big, stakes are high, and consequences can be fatal. On the night of May 5th, 2016, Jacob Juma was driving home through Nairobi's leafy Karen neighborhood. He never made it back. His black Mercedes-Benz was found riddled with bullets, over 10 shots fired, with most aimed at the driver's side. Strangely, nothing had been stolen. His phone, briefcase, wallet, everything was intact. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. The news broke like wildfire. Kenya woke up to headlines that a man who had spent the last few years calling out corruption, challenging power, and accusing state officials of grand theft was dead, just like that, silenced. What made it even more chilling, Juma had predicted it. Weeks before his murder, he posted multiple tweets saying that high-ranking government officials were plotting to assassinate him. He didn't hint, he named names. He accused Deputy President William Ruto directly. He claimed intelligence service were tailing him. He said, "If I'm killed, Kenyans know who did it. It wasn't propaganda, it was a warning." And now, he was gone. A public reaction was explosive. Opposition politicians, especially those in court coalition led by Raila Odinga, said the government had blood on its hands. Raila claimed that Jacob Juma had been assassinated because of what he knew, especially about the Eurobond scandal and electoral fraud. Protesters marched, hashtags trended, people demanded answers. But as days turned into months, the investigation stalled. CCTV footage from the area went missing. Witnesses were tight-lipped. No arrests, no motive officially confirmed, no justice, just silence. It felt like the system Juma had so loudly criticized had swallowed the truth. To date, Jacob Juma's murder remains unsolved, but his death sent a chilling message. In Kenya, exposing the powerful can cost you your life. Jacob Juma's death on the night of May 5th, 2016 sent shockwave across Kenya. Found riddled with bullets in his car along Nairobi-Lenana Road, the assassination of one of the country's most vocal and controversial political figures was nothing short of chilling. The nature of the killing, brutal, targeted, and brazen, immediately sparked speculation of political motivated execution. The public reaction was swift and intense. Hashtags like "Justice for Jacob Juma" began trending. Many believed his murder was not random, but rather the culmination of months of tension, exposés, and warnings. Juma had consistently claimed that powerful state officials were after his life, even tweeting days before his death that senior figures in government wanted him eliminated. To his supporters, his murder was proof of a silenced whistleblower. Political leaders, particularly from the opposition, pointed fingers at the government, demanding a thorough and independent investigation. Raila Odinga, a close associate of Juma and the opposition leader, attended his funeral and used the platform to accuse the state of being complicit in the killing. The tension further deepened Kenya's already polarized political landscape. Despite public outcry, the investigation into Juma's death stalled quickly. There were no arrests, no named suspects, and no visible progress. Questions were raised about missing CCTV footages, delayed police response, and inconsistencies in early reports. The Kenya police labeled it a complex case, but many Kenyans lost faith in the system's ability or willingness to solve the crime. Juma's death also marked a chilling moment for activists and critics of the state. Many began to self-censor, fearing similar consequences. The case remains officially unsolved, a cold file in Kenya's long list of politically suspicious killings. Years later, Jacob Juma's murder continued to symbolize the danger of speaking out in a system where power often operates in the shadows and justice remains elusive. Jacob Juma's life was marked by bold activism, sharp criticism of the state, and an unrelenting pursuit of what he claimed was truth and justice. His controversial business dealings and fearless exposé earned him both admiration and powerful enemies. His assassination in 2016 shook the nation and remained unsolved, casting a long shadow over Kenya's political landscape. To this day, his death symbolizes the risks faced by whistleblowers and the deep-rooted challenges of accountability in the country. Jacob Juma may be gone, but his voice and the question he raised still echo.